Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely wild. We're looking at a highly provocative framework by Professor Jeang. And what he does here is pretty brilliant. He basically takes ancient philosophy and mashes it up with modern macroeconomics to explain the literal structure of our global reality. It is a deep, deep dive into how power, money, and honestly, our own minds are all completely interconnected. Okay, let's dive into this with a question that's probably going to bend your mind right out of the gate. Is our geopolitical reality just a collective hallucination? Well, according to Professor Jeang, the answer is a resounding yes. He argues that if we actually want to understand current global tensions, things like the friction between the US and Iran, we first have to wrap our heads around the idea that the world as we know it is essentially a collective fantasy constructed by the people in power. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll hit Section 1, the allegory of reality. Then, Section 2, consciousness as wealth. Section 3, the financial order. Section 4, the price hierarchy. And finally, Section 5, the indoctrination machine. All right, jumping right into Section 1, the allegory of reality, setting the philosophical foundation. To really grasp modern geopolitics within Jeang's model, we have to travel way, way back and deep underground. See, Professor Jeang anchors his entire geopolitical theory on Plato's famous allegory of the cave. So picture this. You've got a million people chained together deep inside a pitch-black cave. They are completely shackled to the floor, right? They literally can't even turn their heads. All they can see is this blank wall directly in front of them. Now behind them, there are these hidden figures walking in front of a massive fire, and they're holding up puppets to cast moving shadows onto that wall. The shackled people are just mesmerized. Because they have never, ever seen anything else, they genuinely believe these shadows are the real world. They even invent a whole language to name and describe them. So the crucial point is really captured in this idea from the source. All their power rests on our belief in their power. They themselves don't have any power except to manipulate us. Professor Jeang stresses that those hidden figures casting the shadows, the elite, the game masters, they don't actually force us to do anything. I mean, there simply aren't enough of them to use brute force. Their power relies 100% on trickery, deception, and, crucially, our willing participation in the illusion. But wait, what happens if someone breaks free? Well, in the allegory, one prisoner realizes the chains are actually super weak. They're just like ropes and ribbons, and he escapes. He stumbles out of this dark cave into pure, blinding sunlight. And once his eyes adjust, it hits him. The cave was a total fake. He falls in love with the true, beautiful world outside. But here is the shocking twist. When he goes back down into the cave to tell the others the truth, to try and free them, they don't celebrate him. In fact, because they are so deeply, psychologically attached to their shadow world, they kill him. The prisoners themselves enforce the fantasy. Moving to Section 2. Consciousness as true wealth, the ultimate currency. So how exactly does this ancient Greek thought experiment translate into actual, tangible economic value today? Think about the act of making a vase. If you're a potter and you're distracted, maybe you're listening to music, chatting away, just generally lacking focus, that vase isn't going to turn out very good, right? Its market value will be pretty low. But if you give that exact same clay your completely focused, undivided conscious attention, the resulting vase will be beautiful. It'll command a much higher price. Jeang's core argument here is that it is our conscious attention, our focus and imagination that actually creates wealth. Money and capital, they're simply the tools used to extract and store our consciousness. And if you look back throughout history, different eras used completely different mechanisms to basically harvest this human attention. In ancient Egypt, it was the pyramids and religion. In ancient Greece, Homer's epic poems focused people's minds. For a massive chunk of history, it was the Bible. Now, in our modern era, Jeang argues the primary mechanism for extracting and storing human consciousness is the US dollar. But he points out this massive shift that's happening literally right now. He claims we're seeing a war for humanity's soul between the US dollar, which represents the old world order, and artificial intelligence, which represents this brand new system for capturing our attention. Which brings us to Section 3, the global financial order, building the modern cave. So, if the US dollar is the current mechanism, who's actually casting the shadows today? Who are the game masters? Jeang methodically breaks down this hierarchy. At the absolute top, you have the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS in Switzerland. They are essentially the central bank of central banks. Right below them, you've got the World Bank and the IMF, and they dictate the broader rules of the global financial order. And then below them are the national central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the US, the PBOC in China, or the Bank of England. Together, these entities construct the rules of the game that every single one of us plays. And the fundamental purpose of this incredibly complex financial system, according to Jeang, is actually surprisingly simple. It's designed to use the US dollar as the ultimate vacuum for wealth extraction. The framework posits that every single time the US dollar is used in global trade, it is effectively paying a tax to America, simply because America holds the unique, exclusive power to print that currency. So it functions as this continuous global transfer of wealth from the rest of the world straight to the powers that be. All right, Section 4, the geopolitical price hierarchy, the global board. Now, what's really interesting about this is how this system of wealth extraction creates a very specific geopolitical game board. Jeang maps out the global economy into a strict, multi-tiered hierarchy. At the very bottom, you have resources. This role is provided by places like Russia and the Middle East. One step up is manufacturing, which is primarily assigned to China. Above that is the knowledge economy, a tier reserved for Europe and the Five Eyes nations. And sitting at the very top, controlling the whole shebang, is finance, the United States. Jeang argues this system is inherently rigged to benefit the US and its allies, to the direct detriment of resource and manufacturing countries. But even within this completely uneven playing field, there's a big distinction to make. Countries like China and Russia might be really unhappy with their lower-tier positions, sure, but they are at least allowed to play the game. They get to participate in the global economy. Contrast that with nations like Iran or North Korea. If the game masters decide they don't like you, you aren't just put on a lower tier, you are completely excluded, banned from the game entirely. And this directly addresses that opening question we had about why severe geopolitical tensions exist with nations like Iran. It's because they are being forcibly kept outside of the cave's economic system. And finally, Section 5, the indoctrination machine, enforcing the rules. All of this naturally leads to a massive question. How on earth do you convince the entire world to actively participate in a system that is literally designed to extract their energy and resources? Well, you can't exactly just tell them, right? You have to mask it. Professor Jeang explains that the American empire creates what we constantly hear referred to as the rules-based international order. We're talking about multilateral organizations like the UN and the WTO, but in Jeang's framework, these aren't neutral, benevolent peacekeepers. No, they are the modern-day shadows on the wall. They are highly calculated projections designed by the empire to fool all the participants into behaving exactly how they want them to. And to make billions of people actually believe these shadows are reality, the system relies on three major pillars of indoctrination. First up is education. Jeang claims that universities aren't actually there to teach objective knowledge. They're there to condition students into accepting the current system as just and fair. Second is media. Outlets like CNN or the BBC aren't just reporting the news. They're actively convincing you that this international order makes sense. And third is culture. Hollywood, pop music, television, these establish our everyday norms and values, so the deception just feels like natural, undeniable reality. It's full-on comprehensive conditioning. Which brings this entire framework full circle, right back to Plato's cave. Just listen to this quote from the source material. If you break the rules, they don't have to come after you because everyone else will come after you. You're destroying their fantasy. The elite game masters, they don't need a massive global army to police every single individual. They don't have to. Because of the education, the media, and the cultural indoctrination, the people themselves will ruthlessly attack anyone who tries to expose the illusion. We police each other simply because we are psychologically attached to our own exploitation. It is an intense, seriously thought-provoking way to look at macroeconomics and global power dynamics. By taking ancient philosophy and mapping it directly onto the modern financial system, Professor Jeang really challenges us to examine the very fabric of our geopolitical reality. So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. If our global systems, our money, our institutions, our media, if they are all just shadows on a wall designed to extract your conscious attention, would you choose to break the illusion, or would you rather remain comfortably in the cave? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today, and keep questioning the shadows.